us this hour. Really happy to have you here. So this was Mesa, Arizona today. Protesters outside the Mesa Gateway Airport today. They were protesting specifically against a company called Avelo Airlines, A-V-E-L-O. Avelo Airlines is a small, low-budget airline that flies people out of places like Daytona Beach, Florida, and Wilmington, Delaware, and New Haven, Connecticut, and some other mostly small airports. Avelo Air also, as of today, is flying deportation flights for Trump's immigration agencies. And because they are doing that, this is now what it looks like outside everywhere Avelo flies.
Trying to walk the walk. If our country is a country that values life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, you know, we all say liberty and justice for all, then we need to act like it.
We feel like this is being done in our name, and as far as I'm concerned, this is absolutely wrong. They're doing this illegally. They're doing this without due process. Everybody in this country deserves due process.
That was at the protest at, again, Mesa Gateway Airport in Mesa, Arizona today. This was New Haven, Connecticut today, outside Tweed Airport in New Haven, where recurring protests against Avelo Airlines for flying these Trump deportation flights. These recurring protests at the Tweed Airport in New Haven just have been getting bigger and bigger every week. Avelo Airlines was scheduled to start its deportation flights for the Trump administration today. And indeed, the New York Times reports tonight that Avelo had a plane today leave Mesa, Arizona, and fly to the airport in Alexandria, Louisiana. And that is quite near those two basically black site immigration prisons that ICE is running in Basile and Jena, Louisiana. State legislatures in New York and Connecticut have basically been having buyer's remorse when it comes to Avelo Airlines. They moved heaven and earth to get Avelo Airlines to operate passenger flights at these small airports in their states. Now state legislatures in both of those places are considering taking away those incentives and taking away those favors from that airline in protest of them doing these deportation flights for Trump. In the state of Delaware, Avelo Air is literally the only commercial airline that serves any airport in the whole state of Delaware at the Wilmington airport. But now, because of Avelo's decision to fly Trump deportation flights, the governor of Delaware, Matt Meyer, says that he now supports the protests against the airline and he supports the calls to boycott the airline. He says he and his family personally have joined the boycott against Avelo. So we're watching that today. We are continuing every week, frankly every day, to see protests against Donald Trump and against his top campaign donor, Elon Musk. We are expecting a really big day of protest on June 14th. That's the day Trump is holding that big military parade in Washington. But even with that kind of red letter day on the calendar a month from now, expecting large protests against Trump that day, honestly, every weekend, every weekday, there are protests all over. There were protests this weekend at Tesla dealerships in Silver Spring, Maryland, and in Rochester, New York, and in Charlotte, North Carolina. They held a big banner, Honk for Democracy, in Sunnyvale, California, and in Berkeley, California, and in Corte Madera, California, where they put up the big boycott Tesla sign on the highway overpass. In Austin, Texas this weekend, there were two simultaneous anti-Elon Musk protests at two different Austin, Texas Tesla dealerships. A lot of the protests this weekend were mom-centric for Mother's Day. Like this one in Arlington, Virginia, Moms Against Fascism. Also, these folks in Rockville, Maryland, celebrate moms, M-O-M, as in mothers oppose Musk. In Madison, South Dakota, people this weekend protested at Dakota State University when Trump's Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, gave a graduation speech there.
Protesters lined Washington Avenue along the way to the Dakota State Fieldhouse, each with signs to express their displeasure with honoring their former governor, disagreeing with her actions as DHS secretary.
We don't think that she is somebody that deserves any sort of honor from anybody. She's currently, right now, violating the Constitution, deporting people to foreign detainment centers without any due process.
I think that Recently, she's shown herself to be a tool of the Trump administration and implementing policies that go against the Constitution of the United States.
I don't know if Secretary Noem felt like doing an event in her home state of South Dakota was going to be more of like a welcome home kind of vibe, but that was definitely not the vibe. I mean, looking at the local press in South Dakota this weekend, the headlines, Noem's honorary degree sparks protest. Meanwhile, a student she's trying to deport earns a doctorate. Headline, Madison, South Dakota residents, Dakota State students protest as Secretary Noem receives honorary degree. With the honorary degree they gave her for doing the graduation speech, she essentially was able to collect, another nice costume to wear. But outside, here's this guy, a doctorate in graft, I could understand. For this person, quote, prison without due process is a concentration camp. On Saturday, there was a big anti-Trump protest in Missoula, Montana. On Saturday also, there was a really big protest in Bethesda, Maryland, at the headquarters of the NIH. Hundreds of people there, including Democratic U.S. Senator Angela Alsobrooks.
I'm calling on Secretary Kennedy to resign.
America's exceptionalism is based on our strength as a science powerhouse, and the cuts from at NIH and other places literally are making us sicker.
On Sunday, for Mother's Day, there were anti-Trump protests in places like Irvine, California at City Hall, a big boisterous one in downtown Lawrence, Kansas. I'll tell you, though, that we've been covering these protests for months now, and I sort of feel like because we've been covering them for a long time, I feel like you can sort of see themes emerging. If you cover this stuff regularly, you can see new types of protests and new catalysts for protests emerge over time. And right now, what I think is emerging is that we're really seeing people all over the country, red states and blue states everywhere, step up more and protest more vociferously over what Trump is doing to immigrants. You may have seen late last week that really disturbing scene in Worcester, Massachusetts. This was Thursday in Worcester. A mother and her daughter both arrested. One of her daughters holding a baby, caught up in what just turned out to be a violent scrum in the middle of the street in Worcester as Trump's masked immigration agents. We're definitely trying to seem tough, but they really seem to have no idea what they were doing or how to handle this situation. The whole neighborhood responded when they acted chaotically, when they swooped in on this woman and the children and the baby, and people were just furious on scene. And they have been furious in a sustained way since. They're furious not just with Trump's federal agents, but also with Worcester police, with local police, for showing up and appearing to help Trump's federal agents as well. After there was this totally out of control scene on the street in Worcester on Thursday, this was the next day. This was Friday in Worcester. Hundreds of people turned out and protested. This was what we're looking at here is Saturday, I believe. People protesting on Friday, marching to Worcester City Hall, demanding answers from their city about why local police didn't protect them and instead joined in. Then over the weekend, Worcester turned out again. Big protest on the town common. Keep your hands off our moms. That was the theme. The name of this protest was Hands Off Worcester Mothers. People again demanding their local authorities answer for not protecting them. You see the sign there, Worcester PD, traitors to democracy. Protesters in Worcester say they're going to be back and in considerable numbers tomorrow, Tuesday, for the city council meeting in Worcester. They say they want answers. They want that local mom back, for one. But you're seeing this kind of pushback, this kind of response, kind of emergency response in the moment, and then a sustained anger response after. Everywhere, people are being snatched off the street by Trump's agents. I mean, this is what the local news looks like now all over the place.
Let's go to Framingham next, where another protest took place. Dozens of people on the steps of City Hall. They were calling out the increased ICE activity in the city and the detention of Daniel Oriana. Oriana was picked up by ICE on Monday on his way to work, and reports show that he has no criminal record. Protesters say the community is scared and due process is being ignored.
Our neighbors are terrified. People are afraid to go to school. They're afraid to go to work. I want someone to stand up for me. I live in Framingham. I'm really anxious and hoping that our legislature, both local and state, will step up and come out and stand up for these people like Danielle Orellana, who's been taken off the streets. It's terrifying.
ICE has yet to comment on the arrest.
It's Framingham, Massachusetts. There were protests in Portland, Oregon this weekend outside the ICE building in South Portland. After the mayor of Newark, New Jersey was arrested at the immigration prison in his city on Friday, there were protests there afterwards, both at the site where he was arrested, at this prison that ICE is operating in Newark, also protests in response to that arrest in New York. Today in Newark, there were faith leaders there at that site leading protesters in prayer. You know, and I will tell you, as insane as it was that Trump's immigration agents manhandled 3 members of Congress outside the gates of this facility and arrested the Newark mayor there on Friday, today Newark City officials went back there in person, back to the gates of that facility again. They once again served notice that that federal ICE facility is not legally operating according to the city of Newark. So Newark city officials went back there today, serving the same papers, again, demanding the same access. Again, you can arrest the mayor, you can create a violent scrum outside those gates, but Newark is not giving up. And you know, here's just something to know, something to kind of stick a pin in here. By now, of course, you have seen how chaotic and panicked the scene was at the Newark immigration prison on Thursday. The actions of those federal agents are definitely disturbing in terms of how violent they were, the fact that many of them had their faces covered, the fact that indeed they were in the middle of arresting an elected official and shoving around members of Congress. But you admit, in looking at this, it also kind of looks like amateur hour, doesn't it? I mean, these federal agents really appeared to have no idea what they were doing or how to handle this situation. The agents who carried out this chaotic, shambolic arrest were from HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, previously a very, very low-profile law enforcement organization. But you now see HSI everywhere in this Trump term, particularly in like newsworthily violent moments. And we don't know why Trump is using HSI agents for things like this now, and for so many of the arrests and actions that keep making news because of how violent and chaotic they are. But it's just worth paying attention to that. And it's worth knowing that if it looks like these HSI agents don't really know what they're doing in situations like this, it might actually be because they really don't know what they're doing. They are not trained for this. This is not what they are supposed to do as a law enforcement organization. A former assistant director at HSI with decades of experience in the agency told us this today. Quote, HSI special agents are trained and equipped to be skilled investigators, targeting complex schemes employed by sophisticated transnational criminal organizations. Crowd control is not something HSI special agents are routinely trained or equipped to do. Asking them to do so creates an officer safety issue, as well as raises the potential for personal and professional legal liability for HSI agents. Again, a former senior official at HSI telling us that today. And yeah, definitely, I understand the point about an officer safety issue being created by these guys doing stuff that they're not trained to do. But I would also mention a public safety issue. Not just an officer safety issue, but a public safety issue. Since they keep using agents from this particular agency for clusters like this. I mean, presumably at some point we're going to get members of Congress and senators looking into what appears to be the quite considerable distance between what exactly it is that HSI is doing under the Trump presidency versus what they're actually trained to do under the law. Because there's a reason that this particular agency keeps ending up on your local news and on social media and right at the middle of all of the most infamous actions of this administration in American streets. This is not what they are trained for. Why is it that they are the agency that again and again is being tasked with doing it? So we got a lot to get to tonight. This, for example, was tonight on the United States Senate floor. This was Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz.
No president should take a $400 million gift from a foreign country. I shouldn't have to explain why, but it is a high principle, literally enshrined in the Constitution, because people who we have representing us should know, not think, but know, that their representatives are focused on them and this country only, that our loyalties are not divided, that our minds are not wandering elsewhere. The emoluments clause in the Constitution. It's a fancy phrase, but a simple idea. No foreign gifts. If foreign government offers you anything, but especially something close to $500 million worth, the answer is no thank you. End of story. Very simple. In one fell swoop, Trump is selling out one of the most iconic symbols of American power that we have. And what people will now see is the most powerful man on earth flying around in a plane paid for by a foreign government. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It's wildly corrupt. Senator goes on to say, just because they are doing the corruption in plain sight does not make it any less damning or sad or gross. Senator Brian Schatz speaking on the Senate floor tonight. We are now really hitting our stride on the kleptocracy part of what's going on here. While important parts of the federal government that serve the public just collapse under Trump, while Trump's FAA, for example, finds that it is no longer capable of keeping air traffic control systems reliably up and running at, say, Newark Airport, at one of the airports serving the nation's largest metropolitan area, as Trump's Pentagon has just dropped not one but two F-18 fighter jets into the sea, just slipped right off the aircraft carrier, and oops, that's gone. Nevertheless, in true kleptocratic fashion, the dear leader has his plane. He has just arranged for himself, as Senator Schatz was just talking about there, he has just arranged for himself a gift of a $400 million plane for himself that he wants to use while he's president, and then he plans to keep using it himself after he leaves the presidency as well. As if he's ever planning on leaving the presidency. For us, the public, we've got, airline CEOs emailing customers today saying, oh God, geez, this air traffic control thing, whoop, please keep flying. We swear we're being as safe as we can. That's what the public is contending with. But, what does Trump care? He's getting his own $400 million personal plane as a gift from a foreign country that he's going to go do some deals with as president of the United States, heading out today on this big Middle Eastern trip. I mean, for us, the public, we're all dealing with the cancellations and the delays and the reduced number of routes and the panic from the remaining air traffic controllers who have been put in this situation by whatever is going on at Trump's FAA. We, the public, are wondering what it meant when these guys insisted on putting in Starlink at the FAA. They started inexplicably using equipment from the company run by the president's top campaign donor to supposedly upgrade our air traffic safety systems a few weeks ago without a normal contracting process, right after that same donor demanded the resignation of the head of the FAA. We're all left wondering, as the FAA is apparently no longer able to reliably keep air traffic control systems running at major airports, should we be worried that they did that right before this all started falling apart? I mean, that's how it's going for us, the flying public. But for him, awesome flying palace he gets to keep. So long, suckers! In the shadow of the plane debacle tonight, that sort of textbook example of how a kleptocracy works, where the guy at the top converts the assets and functions of the nation and its government for his own purposes, and everybody else gets nothing. Like, that's how kleptocracy works. In the shadow of that plane debacle still unfolding tonight, we've got another story for you this evening about Trump doing something for himself while apparently making sure that nobody else in the country can get that same thing. We've also got news tonight on Trump's apparently illegal efforts to fire people and shut down parts of the federal government that he doesn't actually control. He is, of course, the head of the executive branch, and that gives him a reasonable amount of power over what happens in the executive branch. But it doesn't give him power over the other branches of government, right? The other two branches are the courts and the Congress. How can you tell if some part of the government is not part of the executive branch and instead it's controlled by one of the other branches? Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's not that easy to tell, but sometimes it's right there. Sometimes it's in the name. When, for example, it's called the Library of Congress, that's a hint that it's of Congress. It's not the Library of the United States. It's certainly not the Library of the President. Can you imagine? No, it's the Library of Congress. That's a hint that that's part of the whole Congress thing. Trump has still purported to fire the Librarian of Congress, and he's trying to install people as staff beneath that top job as well. Today, some of those people turned up at the Library of Congress and demanded to be let inside. The staff said no. The staff of the Library of Congress said, no, you don't work here. They called their lawyers and they called the cops. And those officials that Trump had sent over to the Library of Congress to bust in, they did not get in. Trump in the last several days has tried to fire the director of the Copyright Office, which is housed at the Library of Congress. Also the vice chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Also the commissioners at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I say he's tried to fire them because for some of these people, it really does not seem like he is legally allowed to fire them. We are going to talk tonight with one of them who is absolutely fighting back, is not going along with it, does not concede that she has been fired at all. And that's kind of the theme at this point, the fight back, which is understandable because if you look at the polls, they are not popular. And if you look at their actions, they are not smart. And if you look at the headlines, they are doing things that are flagrantly and obviously corrupt. And every single day, on top of being unpopular, unsmart, and obviously corrupt, they are continually doing things that have zero constituency. Doing things for which literally no one is in favor, except for the proverbial cartoon villain twirling his mustache somewhere, right? I mean, the headlines just today, Trump administration halts research to help babies with heart defects. Who is the constituency for that? Who voted for that? Or this one, federal purge guts infant death prevention campaign. Alarming doctors. Yeah, who voted for that? Who wants that? Who's the constituency for that? That thing that Trump just did. Today we learned that Trump cut off the funding for the medication used by horses that are ridden by national park rangers. Who's in favor of that? Seriously. He cut off the funding for toner cartridges for the printers at the Social Security Administration. Because, yeah, that's waste. That's fraud and abuse, right? That they can print. This comes after he plans to cut Narcan. Narcan does nothing except keep people alive if they overdose. He's cutting Narcan. This comes after he cuts Meals on Wheels. Who's against Meals on Wheels? It comes after he cuts Head Start preschool. Because who among us didn't think that the preschool kids were the ones who were getting it too good? And Making America Great Again was about putting them back a few notches. I mean, honestly, these guys every day are doing things that have zero political constituency, that do nothing other than harm the country and harm the people in this country who are least able to articulate for themselves the pain that Trump is causing them. Every day they are doing things that have zero political constituency, that obviously hurt the country, while they are already historically unpopular, making headlines for really radically flagrant corruption, and while there are already people in the streets protesting against them every single day of the week in every single state of the country. That is how we are starting the second 100 days of the Donald Trump presidency. Total debacle. Stay with us.